Okay, so hi everyone. Today I have David Friedman with me. Uh, this is a second chat with him. He is just brilliant. If you watched my previous video with David, then you would know who he is. But just in case this is your first video, so please introduce yourself, David.
Sure. My name is David Friedman. I'm an academic economist with a PhD in physics and spent something, I guess, a little under 30 years, no, over 30 years actually, at law schools because my main professional interest in recent decades has been the economic analysis of law. I'm interested in lots of other things. And if you want more information on me, look at my webpage, which is daviddfriedman.com, and it has the full text of several of my books, as well as a good deal of other information.
Okay, great. So today we are going to talk about flexible immigration and open borders in general.
Mhm.
And I suppose generally the objections to open borders are, as far as I know, are generally based on this view about like culture or like uh, ethnicity and
There,
you know.
there are different arguments against it from different people,
Yeah.
and probably one argument against it, the reason that the U.S. labor unions have generally been against it, is the idea they don't want more competition on the labor market. Uh, but I think the arguments by people who are generally sympathetic to markets, to libertarians or people who are close to libertarian, uh, that I'm familiar with, there are basically, I think, three different arguments. One of them is that poor people will come in and go on welfare. One of them is that people who don't agree with our approach to a political system will come in and vote and turn our country into something more like countries we like less. And one is that the foreigners will change the culture in various ways. The first one is a legitimate issue. And the proposal I made in my first book about 50 years ago was that the new immigrants should not be should not get welfare payments, but that the taxes they paid should be reduced to reflect the fact that one of the things the taxes money went to was welfare, and they now weren't getting it. And that seemed to me a reasonable solution to that particular problem. Uh, the voting, to begin with, I don't assume that new immigrants will instantly get the vote. If you actually look at U.S. history, for about the first century of U.S. history, there were no serious restrictions on immigration, but there were restrictions on citizenship. So that you had to do various things in order to get citizenship. Until you're a citizen, you can't vote. Uh, in terms of culture, it seems to me that the evidence of American history is that that isn't really a problem. That, we have had, I mean, in a sense, I represent a mildly different culture. My ancestors were Eastern European Jews. There's a wonderful book by Leo Ralston. Uh, uh, I don't remember the name of it, but it claims to be about the Yiddish language, but it's really a picture of the particular culture he grew up in, and that my parents, I guess, would have grown up in, which was immigrant Ashkenazi culture in America. And I think on the whole, our culture has been good for the country. Uh, we have our house cleaned once a week, but a two or three members of a Mexican immigrant family spend a couple of hours cleaning the house, and we pay them for it. And as far as I can tell, they are valuable members of the community. The son, in fact, last I heard, was going to one of the universities of California. Uh, so I don't really see any particular reason. And in particular, the foreigners who choose to immigrate are going to tend to be those foreigners who don't much like the country they're from and who see this country as a more attractive one. And there are
Mm.
certainly lots of people who are already here who, in my view, don't have a the culture that I want. So I don't see any particular reason to think that letting in people freely will result in a less attractive culture any more than it has in the past. So I guess those would be my reactions to what I seem to me to be the three main arguments. Now, there's a fourth argument you could make, and that is that certainly some people will be worse off as a result, that the immigrants will be competing with U.S. labor. At the same time, they will be U.S. citizens will get benefits from the same benefits you get from foreign trade, comparative advantage, the fact that you will have a immigrant, for example, the people who clean our house for us. I don't know if we could, I don't know when they immigrated. The son really treats English as his first language, but the parents don't speak English very well. Clearly their main language is Spanish. So I'm guessing that the parents immigrated and the son was either born here or came here as a small child. And so anyway, so I don't think, I guess my point is that to a considerable extent, they are providing services that weren't being provided. And to the extent that they result in some areas in competing down the wages of some American workers, that also means competing down the prices that Americans have to pay for that labor. That in general, it's been established in the common law for a very long time that competition is not a tort. That when one more person joins a profession, he makes the other members of the profession a little bit worse off because he's competing with them, and he makes their customers a little bit better off for the same reason. So I don't think I can understand why some Americans would be against immigration if they happen to think that they're going to be in groups that the immigrants are competitors to, are substitutes for rather than complements for. But I think overall it's pretty clear that Americans are better off, not worse off.
Yeah, there's also this argument that like people like me, or like brown people or black people like me, generally have like on average like low IQs, compared to like people who are, yeah.
Whether that's true or not, I doubt it's actually true with your ethnic group. I'm guessing that from your name that you're Indian or
Yes.
maybe, yeah, I suppose it could be Bangladeshi or something, but from that general culture. And I know of no evidence, in fact, that group of people has lower IQ. There is some evidence that sub-Saharan Africans do, although it's not clear how good that evidence is. There's a very nice set of pieces by somebody who offers evidence that African IQ cannot, in fact, be as low as people claim it is. But whether that's true or not, it's a mistake to assume that we are injured by having low IQ people come in. That after all, if anything, you gain most by trade with people who are different from you. So that that means that if we let in, if we're all very smart, it's nice having other smart people around, but there are lots of them. But if you're all very smart, it's nice having some not so smart people who are willing to do the kind of jobs that you don't like doing and do them for you. So it seems to me that argument is wrong. First, in that I don't think there's any reason to expect the immigrants to have lower IQs, if anything higher, since immigrants are not a random part of the population, and they're people who have the willingness and energy to leave the world they've lived in and come somewhere else. Some of the immigrants will be from sub-Saharan Africa, but I think the evidence that, as Chandra Chisala has got some very interesting stuff. I have a blog post that discusses his work if people want to look for it on my blog. And his evidence suggests that African immigrants to the U.S. in fact do very well, and that it is at least dubious that Africans in Africa are really as stupid as people have been arguing. So I don't think there's any particular reason to expect that immigrants will be less intelligent. And in a sense, the fact that some of the immigrants is willing to immigrate here is on the whole positive evidence. It means that he's willing to take a risk, he's willing to do something, and people who are willing to do something are generally an asset.
Yeah. Yeah,
I observe whenever I travel across the country that as far as I can tell, most of the motels in America are run by Indians.
well,
I don't know why, but it seems to be an ethnic group that's good at running motels.
yeah,
Uh, and since I like having motels to go to, that seems to be a good thing.
yeah, of course, of course. And I mean, even if someone is like dumb, as you said, right? Like even if someone is like, suppose have very low IQ, they can still do some things that,
Yeah.
these high IQ people would not want to
Yes.
do. Like, for
Yes.
example, if you want like someone to do like simple jobs like, gardening, cleaning,
Hmm.
uh, you know, and
Yes.
uh, like cleaning up garbage or something.
Mhm.
Like,
Yes. There are quite a lot of things. Now, one problem in our present society is that we have both minimum wage laws and welfare systems,
yeah,
so that if you say nobody is allowed to have an income less than X, then if you bring in not very productive people, you end up having to subsidize them.
yeah,
But that's our mistake. And that's, as I say, I'm suggesting that the new immigrants should not be subject should not have access to welfare. And uh, beyond that, and I don't believe, I think nobody should have minimum wages. That's a different issue. I think that
yeah,
minimum wage is a way of telling people that if you're not very productive, you can't work,
yeah,
since people are not going to pay you. Uh, so, so in any case, so I don't think that's a very solid argument. Now, obviously any change is risky in one sense, that
yeah,
you can always say maybe the people who come in will have a culture which results in America becoming less free, but of course they could also have a culture that results in America becoming more free. Uh,
yeah, that's
and
true. That's true. And I mean, generally I've also heard people like uh, say that, so they want to reduce some people, but no, not some, even fewer people, I suppose, like very few. They have this view that uh, countries have like very specific identity, you know, like they are identitarian or something. Yeah,
uh-huh.
some kind of identitarian, and they believe that like USA is like a white country, or India is like a brown country or something like that. It's like they have this
I,
view.
I would say that the US has an identity, and that
Yep.
identity is defined by the verses on the basis of the Statue of Liberty, which are the verses which say, send us your poor people. That's
Yeah.
not the exact wording, but uh, so yeah, no, I think the U.S. identity, the at the point when my grandparents came here, the U.S. identity, at least a little before that, included almost no Eastern European Jews. There were Jews here, but they were first, a good many of them were probably Sephardic rather than Ashkenazi, and they were basically well-off Jews from Western Europe.
Mhm.
And there was mass immigration, uh, which it seems to me I have perhaps a biased view of it, but I think the U.S. benefited by it. Uh,
Yeah.
so, in a sense, I mean, certainly things have changed. That things keep changing, uh, and if uh, as as long uh, as you are getting in people who want to come and are willing to support themselves, I
Mhm.
don't see how that is a bad thing. That the U.S. probably more than almost any other country I can think of, a part of identity is the melting pot idea, the idea that you have a whole bunch of different cultures, and
Yeah.
the I think somebody's line, I think it was in a book, in a mystery or something, was that you could tell where in the world people are being mistreated by what new restaurants have opened in Chicago.
Yeah.
That if things are bad in Afghanistan, there will be Afghan restaurants in America.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are some like rights-based libertarian, it's like, Hop.
Yes.
He uses his argumentation ethics, and
Yeah.
and
Yes.
I think he's against immigration.
he is against immigration, and he argues, I think indefensibly, though I may be wrong, that as long as you have a government, it is not a rights violation for the government to limit immigration. And his basic line of argument is that if you had a anarcho-capitalist society, each individual would be allowed to decide who did or didn't come onto his property, which is true. And he's ignoring the fact that in the society as it is, that's still mostly true. That there are some exceptions, but you can imagine cases where a non-discrimination law forces you to deal with somebody you don't want to deal with. But for the most part, in the world as it now is, if somebody wants a job, wants me to hire him, I've got to choose to hire him. If he wants to rent a room from me, I've got to choose to rent a room to him. But he then argues that as long as the government owns property, the government is entitled to use that property as a private owner would. And therefore, and how should it use it? It should use it more or less in the way the population approves of. Well, he doesn't put it exactly this way, but he essentially puts it this way. The government owns the entire road system. Therefore, it's legitimate for the government to say most of the population doesn't want free immigration. They want immigration with restrictions. Therefore, the government can say, if you're an immigrant who has not been approved by the government, you are not allowed to move on the roads, presumably not on the sidewalks either. And the most obvious problem with that line of argument is it can apply to all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
That after all, if it's true that the government has the right to use its ownership of property in order to enforce rules, as long as those rules are relatively popular ones, then clearly it could also use it in order to make drugs illegal. All they have to do is to say, if you use, buy, or sell this list of drugs, you are not allowed to use the public highways. That means it's not practical to live in the country. They could use it to enforce the COVID restrictions. They could say, unless you've been vaccinated, or maybe even if you have been vaccinated, you're not allowed to use the sidewalk. So you're now locked into your own house. As far as I can tell, neither Hoppe nor his supporters have been willing to consider that question. So the argument that they make, at least that one of the people who I've looked at makes, is you say, look, as long as the government runs the public schools, it's legitimate for the government to say men can't go into the girls' room, into the women's room at the school. And I think that's probably right. But on the other hand, that's a case of using its control of the property to do what that property is for. That given that you're running a school, and the question is it legitimate to use government control of property to enforce unrelated rules, which is what he wants to do. And it seems to me that if you believe that, then you have to throw out almost all libertarian conclusion. You have to say that as long as there is a government, it's entitled to enforce any popular rule, including ones that we normally think of as violating rights. And Hoppe has not said that, and I have not had a chance to one of his supporters, Dave Smith, I think, who is a comedian who's active in the Libertarian Party, at one point said something implying that he'd like to talk to me or something, but he's never in fact invited me on his show. And if he were, I could put those questions to him. So anyway, those are some of the issues. If you look on my blog, I'm pretty sure that I ought to check, but I'm pretty sure I put up my rebuttal. My rebuttal to Hoppe's arguments. Let me take a quick look. I'm almost positive it's there. Yep, immigration. Yes. I've got a number of different things on immigration, but here are the verses. This is America's identity. Give me you're tired, you're poor. Your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door.
Hmm.
And I think that's more nearly the identity of America than what colored people are.
Yeah.
But in any case, if you go up on my blog post, you can, with a little effort, find uh, the my response to Hoppy. I'm wondering if I should be looking at if I should be doing a search for Hoppy rather than for immigration. And yes, open borders, the libertarian argument is the relevant blog post. And then there's, yes, then I also have one on Dave Smith's response to me. He read that post, not and tried to rebut it on his show. And as
Hmm.
best I can tell, he had not actually looked over it before, because at one point when he's reading it, he quotes one paragraph and then says, that's obviously wrong for the following reason. And then reads the next paragraph in which I say, in effect, this appears to be obviously wrong for that reason, but, and give the rebuttal to it. So I think, anyway,
Hmm.
it did not raise my opinion of Dave Smith, but if he ever wants me on his show, I will be happy to come on and argue with him. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like Hobbes' argumentation ethics, I think it's like if someone believes in God, right? So if you go by argumentation ethics, I mean, technically, like from what I know,
Argumentation, if you're curious about it, if you go on my web page and if
yeah,
you look at the uh, just a minute, let me find it. If you look, if you follow the link to libertarian writing, which is one of the top level links of my page, and articles in Liberty, they include, one of the articles on Liberty is called On Hoppy. And that's the article, that's the essay where I argue that argumentation ethics makes no sense at all. That if you think about it, to begin with, his basic argument appears to be that in order to be able to make arguments, you have to be free. That therefore that there's something wrong with with arguing for a position such that if that position were held, you couldn't make arguments. And the obvious problem with that is that there are no libertarian societies. He's arguing, therefore, you have to argue for a libertarian society. There are no libertarian societies, and yet people make arguments. So it's obviously not true that you have to have a libertarian society where people make arguments. I don't think the rest of it makes any sense either. But in any case, if you're curious about my view of that argument of Hoppy's, go up to my webpage,
yeah,
click the link to libertarian writing, look at articles in Liberty, which is the magazine I used to write for, and one of them is called On Hoppy.
yeah. I mean, it's more like about his view, like if someone believes in God and like Hobbes' view of property rights is also, I think, very strict, right? Like, so he's not a consequentialist, Hoppe, right?
No,
So his view on property is like very strict. So I mean, if someone believes in God and practically God owns pretty much everything, right?
right.
So
That's right. If
can God like just kill anyone?
God, not only that, God can
Yeah.
authorize the government to do things.
Yeah.
Right? There's no.
Yeah.
I actually have a blog post which is looking at this question, my in which I'm really discussing on that post whether libertarianism is defined by arguments or by conclusions. So suppose you have somebody who says, I agree with libertarian principles. I believe in property rights. Uh,
Yeah.
all property belongs to God because God created everything, and creating is the normal basis by which we justify property rights.
Yeah.
Therefore, if God says the U.S. government is allowed to make the following laws, then it's not a violation of rights for it to make any of those laws. So you're starting out with libertarian principles and getting entirely non-libertarian conclusions. And then you can imagine another person who says, I don't believe in any of this rights nonsense, but here are the reasons why I'm in favor of legalizing drugs and abolishing minimum
Yeah.
wage laws and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
Which of those two is actually a libertarian? You'd have to decide for yourself. But that's what
Yeah.
the blog post is about.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm, that makes sense, you know. Uh, Another perhaps, I suppose this is nearing end of our chat. I
Yes.
think I don't think there are like I don't think there are any other objections I have, because like based on like my view, consequentialist view, like it
Mm.
seems like economically immigration is just helpful for any country,
Hmm.
you know, like it's
Yes.
just great. So
Well, except out migration may not be.
yeah, like brain drain and
Is
stuff.
That's right.
Yeah,
Uh, and I guess my basic feeling is that if you're a smart person in India and you don't think
yeah,
the Indian government is treating you very well, that you're entitled to leave. And if they
yeah,
want to
yeah,
complain about it, that's their problem.
yeah,
But it is true that it is, I think, even more objectionable to keep people in than to keep them out. But
yeah,
economically speaking, it might make some sense, whereas the other one really doesn't.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, okay, I suppose I'll stop the recording right now. Stick
Hmm?
around
Sure.
after I stop the
Oh,
recording, because I want to like
sure.
ask about like your feedback.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm ending the recording now.